I was disturbed about it and went to talk to David. And he didn't see the incident the way I did, and he certainly didn't see the solution the way I did. So I was really feeling bad about that. And so he said to me, he said, if this doesn't happen, and he meant if it doesn't happen the way I wanted it to, he said, if this doesn't happen, I know one person who's going to leave the church. And I was kind of surprised, and I said, who is that? And he said, you. And I said, oh no, I'm going to stay and bug you. And I did. And I've been bugging him ever since, and he's been bugging me. But I would like to change that word bug to challenge, because I know that David has challenged me, and I certainly have challenged him on many occasions. And this has been a good thing. And while we were challenging each other, we were working on all sorts of things like sanctuary and reconciling and citizen diplomacy. And citizen diplomacy, for you to understand what it was all about, you have to think back to the early 80s when David came, because there was a lot of, we were in the Cold War at that time, and there were missiles in Russia that were aimed at the United States. There were missiles in the United States aimed at Russia. And actually, most of you know that Tucson was surrounded by missile sites. And if there had been an attack, we would certainly have been a target. And at that time, David was very concerned about peace, and we had an excellent outreach committee that was also concerned about peace. And so just then, we heard about something called the Pairing Project, which was an effort by some people in Portland, Oregon, actually, to link up cities in the United States with cities in the Soviet Union. And so we were all excited about that, and David blessed the whole thing, and we sent in all our applications, and the city we got was Novokuznetsk. And this was a city in Siberia, and it was a closed city, which meant that we couldn't go there. But that didn't deter us. So we decided that we would send peace missiles to them. So we wrote letters, and we even made a quilt and sent all kinds of things to them. And actually, I have to tell you, we never did really get to Novokuznetsk because it was a closed city, but many, many wonderful things came out of this initial effort. At about that time, we heard about Sharon Tennyson in San Francisco, who was already beginning to take citizen diplomacy trips to the Soviet Union. So David and Marguerite went to San Francisco to meet with Sharon and went on a training trip with her. And when they came back, then we were ready to start thinking about taking trips from Tucson. So the first citizen diplomacy trip where we took people from Tucson was in 1985. And that trip was led by Marguerite and Barbara Jackson. And that was the first one that my husband Jim and I went on. And at the end of that trip, we decided that this is something St. Francis had to do, that we had to really work on sending citizen diplomacy trips to the Soviet Union so that the people in Russia could get to know the people in the United States, and we could see that we were all one. And this would maybe settle some of this saber-rattling feeling going around. And this was one of the things that we continued to do. And before I go on with that, I need to tell you one other thing that happened during that time. David somehow, I don't know how you did this, but got in touch with the Methodist Church in Tallinn, Estonia, in the Soviet Union. And they became our sister church from about 1984 to 1992, I think. And actually, David took a delegation there once, and he said that he spoke 7 times in 5 days. And I can believe that, but then when Jim and I went later on, they asked me to speak. And I used my limited Russian, and I probably spoke about 2 minutes. But it was a wonderful experience meeting with these people over this period of time. And while we were taking the trips, David was just completely supportive and would always encourage people to go. We probably took 14 trips over there. And when you think of all those people talking to the people in Russia, and then we brought people back from there. Now, the first delegation we brought back, we could only bring Soviet-like officials. I mean, they had to be communist, and of course this was atheist Russia, remember? So when we brought the first delegation over, David invited them to come and speak at St. Francis. And they did. And I still marvel at the idea of these people from atheist Russia who came and spoke, and they loved it, and we loved them, and it was just a great experience. But again, this would not have happened if it had not have been for the tremendous support we had from David for this kind of thing. Don't want to miss anything here. So, what other things? Oh, I did want to tell you that though we never did get to know Kuznets, because we did meet with the delegation from there, but we never could get in. So later on, we were able to get a sister city for Tucson, and Art Evans went with me on a trip then when we were able to choose a sister city, and we got Alma-Ata, which was at that time capital of Kazakhstan, which was one of the republics of the Soviet Union. So even though we never got into the original sister city, we ended up getting one, and that was also very important. I need to read this because I want to be sure I say it right, okay? I know that without David's vision and leadership and ways of inspiring others, these trips would never have been so successful. And I firmly believe that the numbers of people pouring over to the Soviet Union as citizen diplomats and those that came here helped to create the atmosphere that helped dissolve this awful tension we had. It's that 100th monkey dynamic, Rupert Sheldrake's morphogenetic field theory, etc. And that's what David always has believed in so strongly and preached at the core of his theology, that what we each do matters far beyond what we can imagine. And so the people at the time thought that the changes in the Soviet Union came about because of our then President Ronald Reagan. I have to say, I'm sorry. Sorry, Ronald Reagan, you didn't do it. You just happened to be king of the hill when it happened. And later that was reinforced when some of you may remember that Gorbachev made a speech at the United Nations, and he said that it was the people who were going back and forth between the two countries that really brought about the changes. And so I want to thank you, David, for supporting this particular effort and being such an inspiration. And I also want to thank you for putting up with me for all these years.